Right, good morning everyone, it's now 9:30. Welcome to everyone to the Town Hall at Bideford and those joining us on YouTube to the April 2024 Plans Committee meeting. There is no planned fire drill for this morning, so should the alarm go off, please leave the building the way that you came in and do not use the lift. Before we start the meeting, I'd just like to ask the committee members to introduce themselves by stating the name and the ward they represent. So if I'd like to start on my left.
Yeah, good morning everybody. I'm Chris Wheatley. I represent Shepherd and Langtree ward.
Good morning, my name is Kit Heppel and I represent Milton and Tamarside ward.
Good morning, Councillor Chris Leather, and I represent Northam and Orchard Hill.
Good morning, Hugh Thomas, Bideford East.
Good morning, I'm Jane Whittaker, Northam and Orchard Hill.
Good morning, Doug Bushby, Bideford North, and I'm substituting for Councillor Pennington.
Good morning, my name is Rosemary.
Morning, Chris Evely, Development Manager.
Morning, Debbie Fuller, Planning Officer.
Good morning, Stacey Dorey, Head of Legal and Governance.
Good morning, Kirsty Brown, Democratic Services Officer.
Right, so moving on to the agenda. Item number 1, apologies, please.
Thank you, Chair. So apologies have been received from Helen Smith, the Planning Manager, Councillor Smith and Councillor Pennington, but Councillor Bushby is substituting for Councillor Pennington. Thank you.
And Chris Eve is substituting for Helen Smith. Thank you very much. Item number 2, to receive the minutes of the meeting held on the 7th of March 2024. Thank you. Seconder. Do you want a recorded vote? Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. It's Councillor Bushby. Councillor Hames. Councillor Heppel.
Abstain.
Councillor Leather.
For.
Councillor Lott.
Abstain.
Councillor Thomas.
For.
Councillor Wheatley.
For.
Councillor Whittaker. 4. So that's 6 for, Chair, and 2 abstentions.
Thank you. Item number 3, declarations of interest. Members with interest to declare should refer to the agenda item and describe the nature of their interest when the item is being considered. Elected members of DDC and town and parish councils who have considered a plan and application by virtue of their membership of that council hold a personal interest and are deemed to have considered the application separately, and the expressed views of that council do not bind the members concerned who consider the application afresh, which may include further information. Item number 4, agreements between parts 1 and 2. We have no part 2. Item number 5, urgent matters. I have none. Stacey, have you got any?
No.
Chris? No? Thank you. Item number 6, public participation. The order of public speaking is as follows: a member of the town or parish council, 2 members of the public against, 2 members of the public in support, and all of the above have 3 minutes each. And finally, the ward member may speak, and they are not limited to 3 minutes. I will read out the names of those who have registered to speak when we come to each application. So, going on to the planning applications. Application A is application number 1/1234, a local needs dwelling at Monkley. It's on pages 23 to 31 of your agenda. Are there any declarations of interest? No. So I'll now ask the officer to give the presentation then. Thank you, Debbie.
Thank you, Chair. Okay, so application 1/.
Can everyone hear, first of all?
Oh, move slightly. 1/1223/2023/OUT. So it's outline application for local needs dwelling at Monkley. Next slide, please. Yeah. It's me moving them. Oh, right. Okay.
All this high tech is very good when it works. The officer will now give the presentation.
We'll do what we can.
Yep. Okay, so do you want to go back a bit? Sorry. And again. So, location is 400 metres from Catsborough Cross, which is south of Monkley. So, Monkley is a village in the local plan, but this site is, as the plan shows, it's not in the village. It's about a mile south of Monkley in open countryside. Next slide. So this is the site. The main house, Coombe Villa, is owned by the parents. The land where the site is currently owned by the parents, and they're going to gift it to the children. It's not within the garden. It's not curtilage. It's being used as a paddock currently. This would be in planning agricultural land. Next slide, thank you. Yeah, that just shows, obviously it's not in the garden. That's the site itself. The red arrow shows where the access to the site would be. That shows visibility on the main road, but it's not great. So it would go into that unmetalled road and then into the gate. So material planning considerations, all covered in the committee report, but I'll just run through each one quickly. So the principle of development in terms of the local plan, it's open countryside. Local needs dwellings are usually allowed in rural settlements, and this isn't a rural settlement. So in terms of the assessment of whether the applicant meets local needs, that isn't necessary because they don't, it's not a rural settlement, it's open countryside. So in terms of the, in applying the statutory test for determining planning applications, it's actually in conflict with one of the most important policies of the local plan, STO 7. And in terms of character and appearance, design and landscape, obviously it's outlined, so I don't have layout plans and elevations of what the house will look like. But because it is open countryside, one of my refusal matters is design and landscape. So the other matters, environmental impact and drainage, are okay. There's enough space for foul drainage. In terms of highway safety, again, it's not covered specifically here because it's outlined. The red line does show an access, so it can be accessed. In terms of residential amenity, there's unlikely to result in any significant harm. It's quite far away from the nearest dwelling. And in terms of ecology, net gain could be achieved with putting additional hedgerows and trees in. Some hedgerow may need to be removed for visibility displays. However, again, that's a reserved matter, so not for assessment here. But basically, in conclusion, I've recommended refusal because it is, as I've said, it's acknowledged the application may help a young couple onto the housing ladder, but it's contrary to the adopted development plan for North Devon and Torridge District Council. It's removed from the built form of any settlement and is located in open countryside and lacks several key facilities. It's not a rural settlement, which would have at least one community facility, and despite being a local needs dwelling, it is considered as an unsustainable location, which will result on private car to access services, as well as causing harm to landscape character and potentially wildlife. So my recommendation is to refuse. Thank you. Thank you.
I'll go on to the public speakers list. Our first listed speaker is Jessica Burford Redgrove, please.
Need to sit. Yeah.
You have 3 minutes when you're settled.
Thank you. Hello, I am Jess Burford Redgrove, so I have put the planning application in with my partner Ben, and we want to have our home here in Torridge, and this self-build property would allow us to do that. We both grew up in the area, and over the last 7 years have lived and rented in Torridge. Whilst we were renting, house prices increased and the housing market became increasingly competitive. And roughly 3 years ago, we had to move from the house that we were renting because someone made an offer to our landlords despite it not actually being on the market. In order to save enough money to try to buy our own home, we moved in with our parents at Coombe Villa, Monkley. We want to remain in Torridge, but there aren't always the opportunities. And we have considered whether we may have to move away. This build would mean that we could stay and give back to the area. So it's important for us to stay in Torridge to support our families. Ben's grandparents are in Bideford, and my parents obviously are at Coombe Villa and have been there for 7 years. And we're already doing the odd sort of shopping trip for family members who don't drive anymore. We have a lot to offer the community. I worked in the charity sector for North Devon Hospice and a local environmental charity for the last well, 6 years, and now I work for the NHS in communications. And Ben is a chef at the Royal George in Appledore, and whilst working, we've both done additional training and gained experience. So Ben completed his MBQ in professional cookery and gained lots of experience and is now helping to train and develop young chefs. And I completed my master's and a diploma in charity accounting, and I'm working to improve the way the local hospitals communicate with their patients. We really want to find a way to stay in Torridge, where we've both grown up and reinvest these skills, experience and our energy back into the local community, both through our jobs and also supporting local businesses, community groups and charities. I support the organisation of a local volunteer-run theatre festival in my spare time, and Ben ran through lots of mud last year to raise money for the hospice. And when Ben's daughter, Maya, stays with us, we get out onto the beach sometimes and do a beach clean. It's important to us to build in a way that is sustainable. We want to use environmentally friendly materials and technologies wherever we can to lessen our environmental impact, and we want to add to the garden to increase biodiversity, as mentioned. And we want to use local suppliers and local businesses. It's something that's important to us. So this is a self-build project that would make it possible for us to stay close to our family. It would be our forever home.
Can I ask you to wind up, please?
Yeah, we have no issues with any local needs tie because we wouldn't want to sell it. And just thank you for taking the time to consider our application today.
Thank you. Our next resident speaker is the Ward Member, Councillor Pennington, who's not here today, but we have got a statement to be read out.
Thank you, Chair. Statement on behalf of Councillor Pennington. The applicant is one of a couple who are struggling to find housing and have been local to the area for much of their lifetime. They continue both economically and socially, they contribute both economically and socially to the community to which they now belong. Due to losing their rented home, they are now living at Coombe Villas with the applicant's parents. Some background statistics to remind us of the housing difficulties many families face, which are taken from Torridge District's quarterly business report at the end of quarter 4 for year 2002 to 2003. So the numbers in temporary accommodation is 67, up from 43 in the previous year. The number of affordable homes delivered is 18, down from 40 in the previous year. The target is 45. Coming to the local plan and MPPF policies, paragraph ST07, policy ST07, paragraph 4.16. And then there's a snippet from a sentence which says, village and rural settlement may also be enabled on an exemption basis to meet identified local need. Policy ST17, a local balanced housing market, scale and mix of dwellings. Policy ST19, affordable housing on exception sites, the applicant own experience and the low delivery rate of affordable housing, as previously mentioned, demonstrates strong grounds for approval. Policy DM24, the application in principle meets all of the criteria set out in the policy to give weight to the home should it be approved. With respect to the published committee report, it's concerning the site map on page 23 does include other homes in the immediate vicinity. The application is continuous, not only within the present property, but also forms a small community of neighbouring properties. I hope the presentation will be a fair reflection of the wider surrounding area. Had the planning committee been doing site visits, I would have requested one taking place. We did do a virtual site visit. I will just clarify. That's not part of the submission. Back to you, Madam Chair. Thanks.
That's the end of the registered speakers, so I'll now throw the matter open for discussion. Who would like to start off, please? Yes, Councillor Leather.
Thank you, Chair. Well, I'd just like to start by saying I do have an issue with the site being defined as countryside. It most definitely is the curtilage of Coombe Villa. And I raised this at the site visits we had the other day. There's no statutory definition of curtilage in actual fact. But it can be, and I've printed this off, I've searched on the internet and I've printed this off, it says, it can change in location and size over time according to use. Include paddocks and any other land useful to the domestic enjoyment of the occupants of the dwellings, which this does. It was mentioned, part of it was a paddock. It can be used for agricultural or horticultural type purposes, provided that those activities are incidental to the enjoyment of the dwelling. So there's no boundary separating anywhere on that site. It's bounded around its entirety. If we could have put the thing back up, the picture showing the aerial photograph of the site, it most obviously is domestic curtilage, in my view. Yeah, that's the one. It'll go back up in a minute. So I'm coming at this from my view that this is domestic curtilage. Under permitted development rights on domestic curtilage, you can put various buildings up within domestic curtilage. Not an independent new dwelling, but you could put a big shed up on there, you could put a greenhouse, you could put buildings on that site of certain type. So that's what I'm looking at it as. The reason for refusal is given due to its claimed siting in the countryside. Well, it's not, in my view, in the countryside, it's in the domestic curtilage of that property. And also the planning officer mentions its adverse visual impact on the surrounding landscape. But this is only an outline application, so it's not possible to know what the visual impact would be. I believe the applicants, through their submitted planning statement, I'm sure everybody's read that, and I've got a copy here, have provided evidence of a housing need in that planning statement. Now, the government are very pressing local planning authorities to bring forward rural exception sites because of the very urgent increasing need for dwellings in rural locations, and supports those who want to self-build or commission their own homes, which this one does want to. And I'll quote MPPF 63, delivering a sufficient supply of homes. I also printed off here, and this is current, from the Rural Housing Network, February 24. It says, we know that the current housing crisis is the result of decades of not building enough homes, specifically homes that are suitable and affordable for local people. The impact of this is felt acutely in rural communities. We've seen housing waiting lists grow faster in rural areas than anywhere else in the country, and more people finding themselves homeless in rural areas too. We also know that when people can't afford to stay in their local area, vital services are gradually lost, and when a shop or pub or post office closes in a rural area, the whole community suffers. So this is a rural exception site, in my view, and I want to move that we do approve this, because, and I've got the policy reasons here why I think it should be approved. I believe it does comply with STO 7, brackets 4, at 4.15, and I can quote that if you want, and DM24, rural settlements. We talk about building on the edge of either a village or a rural settlement. Well, I've looked, there are about 7 other dwellings, Chair, in the neighbourhood of this. It's not far in off the main road where there is a bus service. And talk about sustainability. Well, lots of places now, either in the urban areas or in the countryside, get deliveries from all the major stores by van deliveries these days. So this sustainability, when our plan was put together, the current local plan, there was a big drive by the government to shuffle everybody off out of the countryside into the urban areas. And the car was looked on and frowned on as, you know, we should do everything we can to stop people using cars. I've written it down, when the local development plan was formulated, government direction on new plans was very much urban focused and seemed to totally miss rural implications, because it was and is a necessity to own a car if one lives in the rural areas. We all know that down here. Again, I mentioned there are 7 other dwellings in the vicinity. So I'm going to move, I'd love to hear colleagues' views, but I'm going to move approval, Chair, of this outline application.
Thank you, Chair. I would tend to agree with Councillor Leather that here we have a very compelling local need case, and I would like to support the applicants in this application. I think there is an air of element of subjectivity about whether it's in a settlement or without it is not in a settlement. And I believe that because of the arguments that Councillor Leather has put forward, I would second the movement.
Right, I've got that. I think the officer wants to come in and vote.
So just I just want to come back on a couple of points. I don't know whether Deb was going to raise it or not. Just regarding garden land, so regardless of whether it's in the garden or not, it would be in the countryside. So garden land, as per the National Planning Policy Framework, is classed as undeveloped land. So even if it is garden land, that's still considered in the countryside and undeveloped. So just otherwise what you would have is effectively every residential dwelling out in the countryside could have another residential dwelling just in its garden, which we know isn't the case. So that's that point. In terms of DM24 being subjective, that's not the case. So we have a clearly defined definition of what is a rural settlement in the glossary of the local plan. And it says, a small, closely grouped cluster of housing that contains at least one identified local service or community facility. So this particular area has no local service or community facility, so it cannot be a rural settlement, so you can't then apply DM24. Looking at the map, it's actually about 1.5k from Monkley and 1.5k from Fibblestock-Stone, so it is plainly in the countryside, not a rural settlement. So you can't just apply DM24 to the site because it's clearly not a rural settlement, if that makes sense. Where was I? I think that's it for now, but I would stress that you have to determine stuff in accordance with the plan. As per Debbie's report, STO 7.4 would be relevant. There needs to be an exceptional need for them to live here. Such an exceptional need would be like a husbandry requirement for livestock, etc. In this case, I cannot see that there's an exceptional need or any policy backing. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Councillor Hames.
Thank you, Chair. Chris has answered both my questions, really. Thank you.
Councillor Leather has said more or less everything that I wanted to say, and quite a bit more, I regress. But, you know, from our own document, from the officer's own document, I mean, there are so many policies that this accords with. DMO 5, DMO 6, DMO 2, STO 3, and DMO 1. And when I read the document, you know, DM 24, that seems to, I mean, it says here, provides the only basis within the local plan for local occupancy dwellings in qualifying rural settlements. That's the issue here, whether it's a qualifying rural settlement. And when you actually look at the curtilage of Coombe Villa, I mean, can you go back to that plan? The original one. I mean, you can clearly see the farmland around it, which has been cultivated and used. Clearly, the paddock area, call it a paddock, call it the garden or whatever. They've got a pond in there, and they've got a garden. It's not a garden how I would like to see a garden, but some people like to see a garden. You know, I'm sure Councillor Hames likes to see a garden. That's a bit of a wilderness. But clearly, it's not farmed agricultural land. I would term it as a garden, and I would support the proposal to grant this application.
Thank you, Chair.
I think all too often we have to harken back to our local plan as it stands at the moment. So I'm delighted to think we're actually beginning to develop a new local plan, which I think will help us considerably in the future, if I'm entirely honest. I mean, I support Councillor Heather. I also feel that if we do not support young people, we are hemorrhaging more and more and more of our skills and talents as they happily leave Torres because they can't find enough homes to live in. I'd like to think we could find solid enough policy enable for us to make this a recommend grant. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, from my point of view, I mean, I am desperate to support this application, but it is in conflict with our most important policy, ST 107, but it makes me so cross that it's stated, you know, for future occupants would have to rely on private cars to travel to anywhere. But I mean, people in towns at one end of the estate to Biddeford use their car every day. And if we don't work with our new local plan to get rid of these terms in the open countryside or rural settlements, our villages and our countryside are literally going to die. But it is in conflict with ST 107 at the moment. So it's going to be a difficult decision, but we've got to make sure that when we do our new plan, that we absolutely nail these policies. So that's my comments.
Yeah, I should have mentioned, I would recommend that there's a Section 106 agreement with this, that it is a local needs dwelling in perpetuity. But I'll just, because in the NPPF, paragraph 63 speaks about point 5, delivering a sufficient supply of homes, and it mentions at 63, within this context of establishing needs, the size, type and tenure of housing needed for different groups in the community should be assessed and reflected in planning policies. These groups should include, but are not limited to, those who require affordable housing, families with children, older people, including those who require retirement housing, housing with care and care homes, students, people with disabilities, service families, travellers, people who rent their homes, and people wishing to commission or build their own homes, which this young couple want to do in the area. So I've quoted that. That supports my recommendation, I believe. And also on page 19 in here is identifying land for homes. And at 70, little b, in there, it's seek opportunities through policies and decisions to support small sites to come forward for community-led development for housing and self-build and custom-build housing. Now, I do take exception with our planning manager when he talks about gardens, as if everybody all over the place want to build houses in their gardens. That really is a bit stretching it. We are considering this one application and its merits, Chair, and I think certainly as a local needs dwelling, it meets all the criteria in my view, Chair.
Yes, Councillor Ames.
Yeah, on the question of self-build, I mean, would there be a possibility for a planning condition that it was self-build if it was supposed to comply with a particular policy?
Over to you, Chris.
Thank you, Councillor Holmes. Yes, you could condition it self-build, but I mean, there's quite a pertinent appeal decision in the back of this agenda, which is actually a local needs self-build dwelling. I think it's page 60, so it's for free. So the main point is here. So this was appeal dismissed. It was just outside Huntshaw. It was about 25 metres from the local settlement, okay, and the inspector actually said that's too far. So just the 25-metre field intervening is not forming that closely continuous form with the local settlement, so you can't then apply DM24. And it also goes on to discuss self-build, and it's not, you can't just consider self-build in its entirety as being acceptable. You have to consider, firstly, the strategic policy of the plan. Is this an acceptable location for self-build? And the answer, in terms of our policy, whether you agree with it or not, is frankly No. In terms of rural exception site, it's not a rural exception site, it's not affordable housing, it's a locally needs tied housing. In terms of paragraph 63, yes, we are delivering as per the plan, so we do actually have a position where we have delivered a number of housing, so we can demonstrate 5-year housing land supply. So it's not like we're not delivering housing. And then finally, sorry to ramble on, Madam Chair, but my main concern is if you're tying this, it has to be related to policy. So the first occupants will have to have lived in a local settlement. Because there's no local settlement, you can't then tie it. So it doesn't meet with either a condition test, so there's 6 tests in a condition, as per paragraph 55 of the National Planning Policy Framework, or it doesn't use section 123 of the SIL regs, which talk about section 106. So you can't really tie it legally to be local needs. So that's kind of the concern here.
Sorry, Chair, surely if the applicants are happy for it tied as a local needs dwelling, it can be.
I think I know the way this, members want this to go, but Councillor Leather, I mean, you have proposed that it is approved. Can you just come up with your absolute policy contents for doing that, please? Yeah. And then we will check with the officer if they are robust enough. But I think our officers, will argue that it is not a rural settlement. And this is where our difficulty comes.
Yeah, there are circumstances where we might be able to be flexible with the rural settlement policy if it's kind of near it, or if it's just slightly outside of. But in this case, it truly is 1.5k away from any rural settlement. So I don't think you could then apply DM24. It would be irrational as per a legal test. It would fail and we would be at risk. But
interrupting, I mean, it's only 1.2 kilometres from Monkley, which is literally 0.74 of a mile.
I'll just refer you back to the appeal decision, where it's literally 25 metres outside of the rural settlement, and the inspector's saying you can't then apply DM24. I appreciate that's quite strict, and it's probably not the way you want to go, but that's what the inspector's saying, as per this Huntshaw appeal. So I think this would be a very, very long stretch to say you can apply DM24.
Whitaker, you wish to come
just
back?
Say that you're quoting this one example of what one inspector said, but that was just one person considering that particular problem. That doesn't actually mean you get another the same verdict from another inspector, quite frankly.
And it is each application on its own merits.
Yeah.
Yes, Councillor Ames.
If you look at the appeal decisions we've been sent, there have been quite a number recently where the appeals have been dismissed regarding rural settlements. So it's not just an isolated judgment, I don't think.
Right. I will put are these reasons, will you accept these reasons that Councillor Leather's put forward? Are they robust enough for an approval?
It's my opinion that you cannot use DM24 to prove this. I mean, we've defined rural settlements in our plan at page 458 as a small, closely grouped cluster of housing that contains at least one identified local service or community, which it doesn't. And then DM24, if I can just go to that. And, I'm sorry to be blunt, but then DM24 then says it needs to be, it needs to form part of a development site forms part of a small, closely grouped or continuous built form of housing that is physically separate from other defined settlements. And then the start of the policy requires it to be in qualifying rural settlement, so it's not in that qualifying rural settlement, which is part of the problem. I do sympathise with the applicants, and I
Right, well, it's up to the committee to make a decision. We've taken on board and we listened to our planning officer. Does your proposal still stand, Councillor Leather?
Yeah, I believe so. I think it does comply because DM24A speaks about the development site forms part of a small, closely grouped or contiguous built form. Or, it says a small group or contiguous built form. This is a small group. As I said at the start, there are 7 other dwellings in the immediate area of it. It's not as if it's stuck out on a hillside in the middle of nowhere. So I think that's the reason I think it does comply. And we all mull over, and I know everybody does on this committee, looks at all our policies and carefully considers them. But they are subject to interpretation. They're not cast in stone. They are our legal planning document, our local development plan, and we always start with that as the basis, you always say, Chair. So I do think we do comply. And the real overriding need is local, affordable housing for local people. In planning terms, that is really, for me, in my mind, the overriding need to grant this one, is that there's a desperate need.
So you are recommending approval as per the policies you just stated, plus the section 106. Are you happy with that, Councillor Heppel?
Yes, I'm happy to second that, Chair.
Right, I think we discussed it long enough, so it has been proposed by Councillor Leather, seconded by Councillor Heppel, that the application is approved. Recorded vote, please.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Bushby. For. Councillor Hames. For. Councillor Heppel.
For.
Councillor Leather.
For.
Councillor Locke.
I will have to vote against because it is against our ST 107, but we desperately need to change our local plan.
Thank you. Councillor Thomas.
For.
Councillor Wheatley.
For.
Councillor Whitaker. For. That's 7 for, Chair, and 1 against.
Thank you very much. So we go on to application number 2, which is application number 1/106923, redundant railway buildings to 3 holiday units, an extension of the north elevation at Station Hill, Bideford. And it's on pages 32 to 48 of your agenda. Are there any declarations of interest, please? Yes, Councillor Thomas.
Yes, Chair. I'm going to withdraw from the debate and speak as a local member.
And you will speak later. Yeah, thank you very much. Yeah, off you go then. Yeah.
Sorry, on the last approval, can I just get confirmation that conditions are delegated to the officer in conjunction with speaking to the chair and vice?
Right, the officer will now give the presentation.
Okay, this application is 1/1069/2023/FUL. It's for change of use of the redundant railway buildings to 3 holiday units with a small extension to the northern elevation and relocation of a disused phone box kiosk onto the platform for use as a pocket museum with the reinstatement of a canopy sign to the Heritage Centre at Bideford Station, Station Hill, Bideford. So probably everybody knows the location. It's to the east of the Long Bridge, shown there with the red dot, the existing station building. And that's the site plan showing the location to the west of the phone box being linked by the place where the sign is going to go up the stairs onto the platform, and then the location of the building. So the phone box is to be relocated to the north of the building on the platform. There are to be solar panels on the eastern elevation, with the red line area being approximately 727 square metres. There will be parking with 1 parking space per unit with an additional parking space for visitors to the south of the building. There is proposed to be a balcony to the northern elevation with a toilet and mess room for the Heritage Centre underneath this balcony in the small extension to the north. The Tarka Trail goes to the west of the platform in this location, with the site encompassing part of the eastern platform, which is not the Tarka Trail. The patios for the holiday lets will encroach onto the platform to the east by approximately 1.9 metres, with the platform width being just over 4 metres. And that's showing you the location of the building. You can see the Royal Hotel in the one on the left, and then the station building behind the carriage, kind of behind the trees to the right of the second picture. That's showing you some pictures of the elevations of the existing building. That's the northern elevation. So there's already a small extension with a flat roof to the north, which will be replaced with the balcony above and the mess toilet area below. These are the floor plans. So there's to be units 1 and 3 will be 2-bed. Unit 2 is to be a 1-bedroom. All 3 units are to have a first floor. There's to be a courtyard area on the platform to the western elevation, like I said, about 1.95 metres onto the platform, with a balcony to the north. And each of the units will have a bin and bike store to the northern elevation as part of the flat roof extension. That's showing you the elevations. So that's the western elevation with patent glazing for the first floor to provide light, and then the solar panels on the eastern elevation. This is showing you the existing versus the proposed western elevation. So you can see there the addition of the patent glazing, the reuse of most of the existing openings, and the small flat roof extension to the north, and the railings to surround the kind of outside area for each of the units. And that's the eastern elevation. So that's the one accessed from the car park with the solar panels on the roof. Again, reusing most of the existing openings, and then with heat pumps that are to be screened to the north. And that's the southern and the northern elevations and how they will alter, with the existing at the top and then the proposed, the existing on the left and the proposed on the right. So there are already some residential properties in the area. These are fairly recent residential properties that are just to the south of the building, and the place where the kind of, is it a transit van, the 2 vans, those will be the parking spaces for the units. So in terms of the considerations for this application, the principle of the development, it's in a main centre, so ST06 would be applicable, and DM18 because it's proposed to be tourist accommodation. In terms of impact on the character and appearance, with changes that have been proposed during the course of the application, the conservation officer now says there's less than substantial harm, and this has to be weighted against the public benefits of the scheme. In terms of impacts on amenities, there's no directly overlooking properties. The change from residential to holiday let was due to the lack of kind of private amenity space, but is considered as a holiday let that it would be acceptable. There is parking, the access is as existing onto Station Hill. There's no flood risk for the area, and because there's no change in footprint of the building, the drainage is considered acceptable, and there have been ecology enhancements proposed as part of the development. So that was the comments which are in the report from the conservation officer, but basically the end, it says the harm should be weighed against the public benefits of the proposal. And those are what are considered to be the public benefits. So the phone box being used to provide a mini museum, the inclusion of the toilet and mess area for volunteers of the railway, the reconstruction and signage for the Heritage Centre, the occupation, accepted that as holiday lets it won't be occupied every day, but it will be more permanent occupation than existing, which is felt to improve the security and reduce the crime and antisocial behaviour, and it will provide unique holiday accommodation for the area. And that's just showing you the signage and the phone box, what it looks like. And those are the highways access onto Station Hill. And DCC Highways said at the bottom, no objections were raised and they were satisfied that it was safe and suitable access. So the recommendation is to grant this application. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'll now go to the public speakers list. Our first registered speaker is Mr. Jerry Kent, please. You have 3 minutes when you're settled.
Okay. Thank you, members and committee. I'm the architect for this scheme, and thank you for considering this report. As noted in the report, the scheme has positively changed in consultation with the planning officer and conservation officer to address concerns, and I thank them for their input into that. The proposal is to try and establish a long-term use that is in keeping and reinstates blocked openings in the building and is in line with adopted policy. Previous uses as a restaurant or offices have not proved to be sustainable or affordable, and the impact has been designed to be minimal to this building as a minor change to a locally listed building. Platform railings are a common feature. When reviewed, there's platform railings of a less environmentally friendly nature on Barnstable platform, and there's various iterations right along the Tarka Trail. And there's no loss of amenity because this scheme has been carefully designed not to affect the Tarka Trail and maintains access even for steam trains to operate from that platform, as negotiated with Bedford Heritage Railway, which includes the mess room that they wanted, the toilet that they wanted, the signage to reinstate something that was lost many years ago to try and promote the Heritage Centre, and moving the phone box to create a very unique pocket museum. And as stated, it will provide more surveillance for the public safety. And thank you for considering this application.
You were under 3 minutes, well done. Our next registered speaker is Mr. Richard Brend, please.
Good morning. Thank you for letting me have these few words. I think the planning officer has said nearly everything that we wanted to say, and also Jerry with the follow-up. It was just to say that obviously we're trying to link it more with the Royal Hotel. We've owned the Royal Hotel for 55 years plus and run it, and it is becoming very difficult to actually make a profit there. We actually haven't made a profit for the last 3 or 4 years, so it is very difficult. It does look busy, and hopefully you've seen we put a lot of improvements into the hotel to actually try and make it profitable and make it, keep it as a hotel for Bideford and for our group. But we only have 30 bedrooms. We found that really, in the ideal world, you need 50 plus bedrooms to make a profitable hotel in the West Country. So we're a little bit short of that. So this scheme, it would provide another 5 bedrooms. We think it would be quite unique, ideal for cyclists, dog walkers, and I think it would sell quite well. We'd like to think so, and we're prepared to, to turn it into this holiday accommodation. Again, mostly for the Royal Hotel, really. That's for my understanding, and that's what we would like to do. Thank you. All right.
At last, registered speaker is the ward member, Councillor Thomas.
Thank you, Chair, members.
There's a couple of factors to consider with this application. One is the impact on the heritage of Bideford, and the other one is on sort of long-term aspiration to bring back a railway link from Barnstaple to Bideford. Although the building is not listed as such, it is a significant piece of Bideford's heritage and history. The original report from the council's own conservation officer said, it's considered to form an important building in terms of its appearance and siting within the conservation area. So it's not just the building itself that's important, but it's also its place in relation to its surroundings and the other buildings in the conservation area. Now, I know some changes have been made since the original application was put in, and the most recent report from the conservation officer said that it was less than substantial harm. But I would say that, you know, assessment of harm is subjective. To me, I think it's an important building for the heritage of the town and that area, and I don't really like what's being suggested with it. I mean, there's a number of alterations to the building which are going to change its character. One of my main concerns is the roof. So originally the idea was to put PV panels, solar panels, onto the west-facing roof, and that was deemed to be unacceptable. And there were going to be roof lights. Now that's been changed to these 3 strips of patent glass. Now on the elevations that went up, they were shown as grey strips on a grey roof. When obviously that, in reality, that's not going to be what you're going to see. Strips of glass will look very different to tiles. And these strips are 2.15 metre by 1.15 metre, 3 of them. So it's going to make quite a substantial change to the look of the roof. Now the report says this conversion will bring public benefits, which are balanced against the harm. But personally, I think the benefits that it will bring aren't sufficient to justify what's being planned. Now, the signage and the provision of a toilet, I think those are both positive, very good to see. Now, talk about creation of a mini museum. It's a phone box. I mean, it's hardly a substantial addition to the heritage. How much are you going to pack in a phone box? How accessible is that going to be? Talked about the possible economic benefits. Was surprised that the applicant hasn't provided any sort of projections for occupancy or shown a business case for this. I mean, I know there may be some people who want to stay in a railway station. I mean, it probably will attract a specific target market, but Bideford as a whole doesn't get the level of visitors that go to the villages, etc. There isn't the same demand in Bideford for accommodation as there is in, say, Instow or Appledore or Westward Ho. They also talk about reduction of crime and antisocial behaviour from having these units there. Now, well, we haven't got the occupancy levels, so we're not sure how often they're going to be occupied. No actual evidence has been put forward to show that these units will have an impact. There have been problems with vandalism and antisocial behaviour around the area. The worst case recently was along the track, which was actually closer to the existing houses, so they obviously didn't deter the vandalism. So I don't really think you can use the fact there's going to be some holiday units that may be occupied some of the year as having any significant impact on crime and antisocial behaviour. There was also mention of the fact that we'll still be able to use the eastern platform, but the applicant owns the platform, so there's no guarantee of that. It's still not going to be a public right of way. So in a sense, nothing has changed there. So I don't think that can be put forward as a public benefit. Page 42 of the report talks about these new units improving the quality and diversity of Northern Devon's tourism offer. Also talks about providing living spaces and toilets with level access suitable for disabled occupants, and also adds its close proximity to the Royal Hotel would allow also allow occupants to use these facilities. Now, to me, that seems a bit of a red herring. The Royal Hotel still has its own platform with an original door from the hotel to the platform. That's never been opened up. And I've never seen anything on the platform around the building advertising the Royal Hotel to draw visitors to the hotel's facilities. So if there's a linkage to be made, I'm just surprised that the hotel hasn't done anything with this previously. And talking about disabled customers and a suggestion they can use the Royal Hotel facilities, how's that going to be possible? The only way to get from the station down to the Royal Hotel is either down a steep flight of stairs or back onto the road and around a narrow pavement next to a busy road, and you've still got to cross the road. So I don't really see how disabled people are going to use these new units and the hotel. So just on a matter of policies, Policy ST04 and DM04 say development should be well related to their surroundings and sympathetic to the character and appearance of the area. I don't think these are. There have been lots of letters of objection to the scheme. The Town Council is very much against it. They've referred to Policy DM7, protection of heritage assets. And then there's also the issue of potentially the loss of station building if we ever bring a railway back, and the impact on that as a strategic development. Thank you.
All right, we have no further speakers, so I'll throw the matter open for discussion. Who'd like to start off, please? Yes, Councillor Leather.
Yeah. When I first looked at this application at home and looked at all the plans, I thought, oh, quite a small setup, really. But it isn't, actually, when you think about it. If you were to rent one of the big living caravans down at Westwood Hall, this is a lot more room in it than you will get in a holiday caravan. So as a holiday let, I think they do work. I think it does work as holiday lets. And I do accept that it is in support of the Royal Hotel, as Mr. Brennan said when he spoke. And we should be supporting local businesses as much as we can. There is no reason. I've seen all the people who've objected online. There are a few who've written in support. But those who've objected, reading some of them, they don't even understand the application. Some people seem to think it's going to be demolished and rebuilt. You know, they've not looked at it properly. They've just seen what is proposed, and they think it's going to be knocked down and something new built, dwellings. I mean, they've just not understood it, a lot of people. And they don't do that. That's a problem with sometimes with people who object. They never really understand what is proposed because they don't ever look at the plans for it. So the only thing I would say is I hope the heat pumps are going to be pretty well screened because they do make a bit of a noise when they're running. And there's 3 of them proposed on the end of the north elevation. The other thing is I've not seen what the material is for that north elevation. Is it going to be stonework matching the existing building, or is it concrete blockwork rendered, or I've not been able to see what that would be. And the other thing is the 3 storage facilities there for a bike in the bin. There's no conditioning about waste collection from the site. Now, I'm pretty sure Torridge's waste collection vehicles won't go onto that car park. They don't go onto private land to collect waste. So I'd like a condition agreed. I mean, I'll move approval of this, but I'd like a condition in there that speaks about the waste collection and how that will be dealt with. Somebody will either have to put the bins out near the road, or I'm sure the holidaymakers won't be doing it.
planning committee should be supporting local business, you know, wherever possible. I am torn because I sit on the town council, and the town council did consider this, but we come here afresh, as the chair said. From a personal point of view, my only concern, my main concern, was the access turning from the Royal Hotel into the site. Now, I know the highways have said that they're happy with it and they don't raise any issues, but and they also point out that it is a 20-mile-an-hour road. But we all know how local motorists treat 20-mile-an-hour speed limits, indeed any speed limit. I've personally, you know, seen you know, cars, motorbikes, whatever, come down around that corner quite quickly. Local people turning into that site tend to be a little bit careful when they're turning in, and they've always got an eye up the road. Holidaymakers may not have that same local knowledge and that same consideration. So I think there is a potential there for a problem, but I do accept that highways have, you know, quoted their figures, and the fact that there hasn't been very many accidents there over the last few years. But I just want to make the point that, you know, that's without having a lot of holidaymakers going in and out of that site, which, you know, if this goes ahead, potentially, you know, we could have. But I am torn with it, I must admit.
I think I'm on the same page as my colleague to the left, actually. It's a local landmark. It's been there for all my life. My grandparents arrived at that station well over 100 years ago on the afternoon of their wedding. People care about it. The town council cares about it. I find myself in a very difficult position. I don't want to see it spoilt. You know, we're losing so much of everything heritage-wise all the time in this country. And I think sometimes we're going to lose everything. But if we are going to encourage tourism, and tourism is part of our local economy, we certainly haven't got enough beds in Bideford to support that need. The Tantons Hotel doesn't exist any longer. And I think the Royal is the only one that you can... I mean, it's just very difficult, isn't it? I want to make sure that we support local businesses, but my heart's telling me that actually we should protect buildings like that. And you're not going to help me, Chair, I know, because I'm struggling myself. But I'll have a listen to what everybody else has to say and come to my vote. Thank you.
Say that you should determine it on policies, not go with your heart. I've done that once, and that's the worst thing I ever did. Yeah.
I shall not go with my heart, but it is a difficult one.
Councillor Hames.
Yeah, I mean, I know to all the previous applications that go back years, none of which seem to have come to fruition. I assume the building, I was going to ask the planning officer whether the building is what it's used for at the moment. I mean, it's all very well saying it should be for community use, but if there's been no sort of attempt to, or funding to take the building over for the community over all these years, you wonder whether it should be for the purpose which has been applied for. But, I mean, setting against that, I understand ST10 says that the railway line should be secured, is that right? In which case does this, you know, the status of the station, the ex-station, fit in with that? The other thing is loss of parking. There's a parking area down at the bottom of the hill, which, is it true that part of that will be servicing this holiday use? No? Right, okay. And the other thing is the actual design of the building. The solar panels, which are quite prominent. As a Green Party member, obviously I want solar, but my partner's family in Exeter, they're converting a Victorian church hall, and they've put in integrated solar tiles, and you wouldn't be able to tell that there's solar there. So I wonder whether that's been considered or discussed. And also regarding the roof panels, there are, I gather, you can have tubes which bring light in, which wouldn't be so prominent. I wonder whether those have been discussed with the applicant, because I do have concerns about the visual impact on this significant building. So if I can ask.
used, and is just kind of used for general storage. So it would be bringing it back into use. In terms of the impact on re-establishing railway link, it wouldn't have any negative impact. It can still re-establish the railway link. In terms of the use of the solar panels were moved to the eastern elevation because they're not visible from the conservation area. So they would be facing kind of towards Easter Water, which was why they were moved onto that elevation. The car parking at the moment is a private car park used by Brend Hotels. There would be allocation of those 4 parking spaces for the 3 units. So it would slightly reduce, but it's used in conjunction with the Royal Hotel anyway, which is what the parking is used for. What were the other questions? Oh, roof lights. So in terms of, they started off as roof lights, and then the Conservation Officer suggested the patent glazing, which is why the applicants went down the changing the surface to patent glazing.
Yeah, so I'm going to come back. I'm rather surprised that the solar tiles weren't considered. I mean, they're in quite general use now, and it would make a considerable difference to the look of the building. So I do have a concern still about that, even though it's on the back of the building.
Paul, you're next.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I'd like to say that I'm generally in support of this application. It supports local established business. It's a reuse and preservation of a heritage building. The Tarka Trail runs to the west of the railway line, so that remains unaffected. And I'm also mindful of future development plans to reinstate a railway line, one way or t'other, which I would welcome, but this development would not, as far as I can see, prevent that were it to become a reality at some time in the future. So assuming Councillor Leather has proposed that we approve this application, I would second it.
Yeah, I mean, for my part, I have been impressed by the ways that the applicants have worked with the officers, both the Conservation Officer and the Planning Officer, and they've had 4 or 5 responses in both cases, so they have worked together. And our Conservation Officer asked for a heritage assessment, which they provided, and I downloaded it, and it makes very, very interesting reading. So I too will be supporting the application.
Does anybody have an answer to the extension on the northern elevation?
Yeah,
so
the material will be the same as the main building.
It will be stonework.
Yeah. Can I just say one thing on the objections as well? So we have had a lot of objections on this application, but like you did say, most of them obviously hadn't looked at the plans. A large number were on the impact that it would have on the Tarka Trail and the impact it would have on the reinstatement of the railway, and also the impact caused by rebuilding this building, which is not the proposal.
So there's no impact on the Tarka Trail
we have reconsulted twice, and there were no objections on either of the reconsults. So on the reconsultation, when it was for holiday accommodation, because it started off as residential units, there were no objections received.
And could I just say, I only mention about waste collection from there because, all right, if it's going as business, if it goes as business waste, that's dealt with. But I'd just like to know that either the Royal Hotel staff will be dealing with it, or because Torridge won't be collecting it. And if it isn't, if it's just left in there, it could cause a problem. Or if it's if it's blowing about or anything, I'd just like to be able to reassure the planning team that they've made adequate provision for collecting that waste and dealing with it.
So I'd like to come back on that.
If you think it's necessary to condition it, then we can add a condition seeking additional details of waste collection. I'm mindful that the National Planning Policy Framework only wants us to have conditions where necessary and actively promotes us to reduce the number of conditions. Personally, I don't think it's necessary. I could see Mr. Brennan nodding over there when you were saying it's going to be dealt with via the Royal, and I imagine that's the info we'll get in. But if you really want it, I don't think it's a problem to add.
No, I'm not going to insist at all on that. I'm happy with what Chris has just said on that.
Well, I'm sure that if rubbish and waste wasn't collected from those holiday units, someone would really kick up a fuss, and then Friends would have to take the situation in hand anyway. So you do not want the condition about waste, right? So it has been proposed by Councillor Leather, seconded by Councillor Heppel, that the application is approved.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Bushby. For. Councillor Haynes. Against. Councillor Heppel.
For.
Councillor Leather.
For.
Councillor Locke. For. Councillor Thomas. No. Oh, sorry. Councillor Whittaker. For. Councillor Wheatley.
For.
Thank you very much. Right, application C on your agenda is application number 1/0092, 24 outline, a local needs dwelling at Newton St Petrock, and it is on pages 49 to 58 of your agenda. Are there any declarations of interest? No. The officer will now give the presentation. Thank you, Debbie.
Thank you, Chair. Okay, application 1/0092/2024/OUT. Application seeks planning permission for one local needs dwelling, with all matters reserved at Newton St Petrock. The application has been called in if the officer is minded to refuse by Councillor Cottle-Hunkin. The call-in is in the report, but it's basically a young couple that's grown up in Newton St Petrock. The application site is approximately a mile north of Newton St Petrock village, approximately 100 metres from the A388. That hamlet there is Newton St Petrock Cross. It's located within a field. There's a small shed in the field and green fields surrounding, as you can see. There's a hedge to the front, so this is outlined with all matters reserved. So the access is not for consideration here, but that is not where the access is going to be. It's going to be further up, so some hedgerow will be removed. That's looking back towards Newton St Petrock Cross. That's looking towards the site, with the nearest dwelling on the right-hand side. Material planning considerations. This is a bit of a repeat from the last one, but again, it's open countryside. Newton St Petrock Cross is not a rural settlement. The nearest settlement is Stib Cross, which is about 2 miles away. We had a previous application for open market. It's now been changed to local needs, so it's a resubmission. But it's still contrary to the local plan, which is the development plan, which is what we should be deciding planning applications on. I've also refused on landscape because it's quite an elevated site. I would say sustainability is not just about, so there's 3 spheres, there's social, economic, environmental. So the local plan steers development based on sustainability. So it's not just about social, but there's also obviously economic and environment. Environment is equally as important. So in terms of landscape, I've refused it on that, even though it's outlined, because inevitably with a dwelling, you get paraphernalia that comes with it, outbuildings, sheds, play equipment for children, tarmac, all the other things, that parking areas that come with a dwelling. So in terms of that, I've said design and landscape is a reason for refusal. In terms of environmental impact and drainage, so that comes up, we consider contamination and drainage. They've proposed a packaged treatment plant and the percolation tests are suitable. And in terms of ecology, as I say, some hedgerow will probably need to be removed to create an access. But that could be mitigated and new trees planted and hedgerows planted. But yeah, I just want to sort of summarise really that yes, ST07, it's contrary to ST07, but that as I say, the plan is trying to steer development to the most sustainable locations, and its environment is also a consideration. So my recommendation is for refusal. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Our first registered speaker is Sarah Bridgman, please. You have 3 minutes.
Good morning, members of the Council. Firstly, I would like to thank you for allowing me the opportunity to speak to you today. Hopefully you remember me from when I was here speaking to you on the 1st of February. We put forward to you the same application, however, as an open market dwelling. Today you'll see that we have amended this to have a local needs section 106 attached to it. Firstly, I would like to address that when we first applied, one of the reasons for refusal was because there was no bus stop nearby. We disproved this at the last committee meeting, and therefore this no longer applies on this report. I'd like to add to this that I find it a bit unfair with the statement that has been added onto your report, saying that you yourselves did not agree with the application in February due to the private transport need and also the surrounding landscapes. However, from memory, I did not believe this to be quite factual, so I looked back through the minutes and videos, and this was the reasons that were written by the planning officers, but not yourselves. As before, the reasoning behind us applying is due to us wanting to be in the community that I grew up in and to have a substantially better family life for our children by doing so. The area of land in which we're applying for has belonged to my family now for decades, a family which over this time has contributed to the local community and provided it also with a local business. I have not been able to remain in that community as there is little property that becomes available for young families. We have applied at this site due to there already being a small settlement of properties around here, which have been developed over the past 30 years. We have taken into consideration the neighbouring properties and would ensure that a property here would not have any negative impact on them or affect any of their surroundings. Adding to this, having a property at this site would enable my partner to continue to grow his building company by being able to store his equipment safely on site and be able to commute to the shop next door, which he goes to daily, and the local areas with ease and create more opportunities. I work in residential childcare, which provides 24-hour wraparound care. We in the local area do not have any childcare facilities. I therefore rely on my parents to be able to provide the childcare that we need to be able to work. With this, being close to them, where we can walk across the field, reduces the need for transport and ease for both parties. As they grow older, we can also easily meet their needs of support also. On the notes, it explains how we would need to remove some hedgerow to enable a safe entrance to the property. This would be compensated for after, as we'll be planting new hedgerow across the whole of the border of the property, allowing the wildlife to continue to thrive and have extra habitat areas. This is a self-build property, and we would be improving the quality of development for this area, with the property being sustainable, of a high-quality build, and also using renewable energy sources, which properties of this area currently do not benefit from. The primary and secondary school pass the entrance of this site for my children, and the bus that stops at the end of the road also commutes to Petrock College for further education. I would be really grateful for you to take into account all of these aspects when coming to your decision. As you and I all know, this environment for my children to grow in will benefit their lifestyle and mental health as they grow into adulthood. The space to be free, kick a football, and embrace the countryside. Thank you very much.
You certainly packed a lot into your 3 minutes. Well done. Our next registered speaker is the ward member, Councillor Cottle-Hunkin.
Thank you. I'll try not to cry this time around. I got a bit emotional last time.
Dear councillors, you've already heard me speak on a very similar application for this young family a few months ago, and this time it's back before you with the local needs tie on it, as was alluded to in that previous meeting. I will go through some of the points I brought up at that previous meeting because I'm aware there may be different councillors here today. I've been a councillor for more than 6 years now, that's why I've got so many grey hairs, and this is the only one I've called in support. This one really stands out to me as being one that is really worthy of our support, and I hope you will all agree too. I've given quite a lot of detail in the call into committee, which you have already read and is printed in the report. This includes the fact that it actually fits in well alongside a number of other properties, as you can see in the map that was provided, on the edge of the small hamlet at Newton St Petrock Cross. So, as Councillor Lever was talking about earlier, it's not a house on the top of the hill in the middle of nowhere. It can be argued that it does qualify for DM24 because it forms part of that small, closely grouped, built form of housing, and there are services nearby, including an agricultural and business builders merchants on the doorstep, which also sell household goods. There's also a church, chapel and community centre within walking distance down the road at Newton St Petrock. So the officer mentioned Stib Cross, but we've got Newton St Petrock, which is a lot closer than Stib Cross. The applicants are a local couple who both grew up in the area and have their family and support system living there. I refute the officer's notion that this is not sustainable. It is located on the school bus route for their 2 young children who attend the small local village school nearby, and surely we should be supporting as a council these small village schools which often struggle to get children. We've got a lack of childcare which has already been raised within our council, and I really think we should be supporting our small village schools. The children's grandparents also live in Newton St Petrock, who help with daily childcare needs. As I mentioned before, we've got a lack of childcare in Torridge. Mr Davies' carpentry business is already based in Newton St Petrock. He already has a base there, and he currently has to travel there because they don't live in Newton St Petrock. He travels there every day for his job. The opportunities for them to buy houses in the area are extremely scarce and often out of price range for local people, which makes it even more important for us to provide this local needs dwelling. I think it's clear that in these particular circumstances, it's more sustainable for them to be living there rather than anyone else, because they would have far less need to travel to and fro for school, for work and to their families who are their support system. Therefore, this application would result in far less dependency on a car compared to them living elsewhere. This accords with Planning Policy ST01, Principle of Sustainable Development, secures development that improves the economic, social and environmental conditions on the area. So if you were to turn down this application, as per the officer's recommendation, stating that it's not sustainable, that would be unfair and untrue. I believe it is also worth noting that there are no objections to the application, and 9 households in the local area were consulted in the hamlet where it is proposed, as well as local residents in the wider area being made aware of it at the parish meeting, where Sarah Bridgman went and spoke to everybody. So a wide number of people have been consulted and no one raised any objections. This accords with Planning Policy DM01, amenity considerations. It would not significantly harm the amenities of any neighbouring occupiers or uses. It seems outrageous to me that as a council we regularly approve literally hundreds of houses across good agricultural greenfield land for big housing developers to build on, and let's admit it, quite often to a lower standard than we would like to see. And yet we are told here to refuse a single home for a local family to build themselves. As a council, we speak about the need to support our young people and to help them find and live in good quality housing, and here we have the perfect chance to put our words into action. I understand this is only an outline application. However, I do know that Mr Davey is a highly skilled carpenter with an excellent reputation, and I have no doubt that the house they build together will be of high quality and environmentally sensitive too. So that would, in terms of sustainability, we've got the social, or definitely meet the social. We've got the economic. He already has a base in Newton St Petrock, and the environmental. We know that it would be done in an environmentally sensitive way. Here in front of us, we have a young couple who grew up in the area and would love to stay in their home community, surrounded by family and friends. As a council, we have the opportunity now to really have a positive impact on this family and their community, and I urge you to all please support the application. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'll just start off by saying, once again, these awful terms in the open countryside of rural settlements rear their ugly head again. And I cannot stress enough that we must get that changed in our local plan.
Well, seeing as I've not started any debate yet this morning, I'll start this one. Well, I'm going to move approval, that we recommend approval on this, because, and I've really looked into this rural exception sites policy, and the government are really driving this now because they realise really they slipped up in what the advice had been given to local authorities. But it does say rural exception sites. I mean, they were established in 1991. I've only realised that recently when I've been looking into it. And we hear nothing about it really here. And yet we do hear from our leader on the council, banging the drum for the rural areas. I've always supported the rural areas, and where local families are concerned, you know, more so in providing affordable housing for them. But it does say here that rural exception sites, and this is from, again, from the Rural Housing Network. Rural exception sites are small sites located on the edge of existing rural settlements. They are allowed land to be provided below market value for residential development, provided it's used to build affordable housing for local people. And this is the interesting bit for me on this. Rural exception sites are allocated outside of the local authority's development plan. Outside of the local development plan. Outside. So homes delivered via rural exception sites represent additional affordable housing for the local community. And it's on that basis I'm moving the approval of this, Chair.
Well, again, I agree with Councillor Leather on this one. I also understand and agree with Councillor Cottle-Hunkin's dissertation, and I would support this application and recommend, well, no, I would second approval with this Section 106.
So you will have to quote some policies, councillors, for your approval recommendation.
Yeah.
Yeah, just a matter of clarity again, exception sites. There's been, Councillor Cottle-Hunkin referred to services nearby. Well, first of all, how near are they? And secondly, can you just clarify again, exception sites, that includes a requirement that there should be services nearby, does it not? Is that right? Through you, Chair, to Chris. Sorry, Debbie. Or Chris.
Thank you. So just to clarify, we actually have a rural exception site policy. It's called Policy ST19. Exception sites are exclusively for affordable housing. This isn't affordable housing, okay? This is a local needs dwelling, so it's important to differentiate between the two. So we do have an exception sites policy. It does require them to be in local centres, villages, or at a rural settlement. It's ST19, but this isn't that policy because an exception site relates to affordable housing. So what you're looking at is a local needs dwelling, and there is a difference.
Sorry, about the services, Newton St Petrock, not quite clear.
Yes, again, it's about a mile, and it requires it to be at the rural settlement. I'm not sure what facilities Newton St Petrock has. Deb can hopefully clarify.
There are two churches near Newton St Pedro. Stib Cross has a pub. Newton St Pedro and Stib Cross are about the same distance, yeah.
Councillor Whittaker.
Thank you. I think sustainability is answered very well here because in actual fact I know Newton St Petrock is a lively and vibrant village, and it may have only 2 churches and no pub, but I don't think that excuses the fact that it is actually a very community-based village, and I think it's an easy walk from this particular site. I also think that, you know, some of the houses there have been there for years. I mean, it's a hamlet. All I can say is roll on the new local plan, which will make all our lives a bit easier. Thank you.
Absolutely agree with that statement. So let me come up with any policies, please, Councillor Leather. Sorry, do you get your round up, Councillor?
Yeah, I was just going to say that I agree with what's been said, and I think based on our vote on the first application that came before us, it would be quite inconsistent not to support this one.
Yes, Councillor Leather.
Yeah, I'll quote the same policies that I did on the previous one. Whispering there. I don't like whispering. I don't like whispering when the public is sat here and don't know what's being whispered.
Tell me what was whispered when you finished talking.
ST07, brackets 4, 4.15, DM24 rural settlements, interpretation of that, and the MPPF 70 little b, and the MPPS 63, with a section 106 condition that it is local needs dwelling in perpetuity.
The whispering was, Councillor Leather, that if it is approved, can we delegate the conditions to the Chair and Vice Chair? That was the whisper.
Yeah. I'm going to learn to lip read anyway.
I think in terms, I'm not going to beat the drum about being irrational, etc., because I agree actually it would, in a lot of ways, be irrational to make a different decision on this one than the first one. As I said before, we do have to ensure that the 106 relates to a rural settlement. This isn't quite in Newton St Petrock, so whilst we'll have a 106, the usual cases with the 106 is that the first occupant lives continuously in a rural settlement, so that would have to be changed to parish effectively. I presume they meet this, but just to clarify, that will have to instantly filter down to parish as opposed to rural settlement, because otherwise there might be a problem with meeting that in the first instance.
Captain Pushby.
Thank you, Chair. I can't remember the policy number that Chris referred to just now with affordable housing.
Playing policy bingo a bit, but I think it's ST19.
Right, well, affordable housing, it's a subjective topic really. A self-build, I would argue, is affordable. If you're doing it yourself, you can potentially afford to do it, whereas an equivalent house already built, you probably, a lot of people wouldn't actually be able to purchase that. But certainly doing it yourself as a self-build lowers the cost dramatically and therefore makes it potentially affordable. So.
Self and custom build is a particular thing. If you want to add that as a condition as well, that it is a self and custom build house, then that would add to the merits of the case. So it's entirely up to you. It would be locally tied. It would be locally tied. So it wouldn't be affordable. It would be locally tied and a custom build, self and custom build house. So we would Section 106, the local tie, and then there would be a condition requiring it to be a self and custom build. So it all adds to the benefits of the scheme.
Are you happy with those? Yeah.
I don't know what does Councillor Leather mean by built to affordable standards? Normally that means the lowest common denominator.
Well, is it? No, it doesn't. And I get irritated when people think affordable housing has to be cheap and nasty. There is a standard. Chris will tell us there is a standard for affordable homes. you don't build great big mansions and that as an affordable home. There's a size is a matter of it, and, all, and I'm happy to leave the conditions on that, as I've said to the planning officer.
Okay, so I think there's 2 points there, actually. There's a distinct definition of what an affordable house is. I don't think this meets that. Actually, on local sites where we pack them in, if you like, quite often the affordable houses are bigger than the open market because registered providers will require them to be of a certain standard. In terms of our policy, DM24, which we're applying loosely here, Part B relates to the scale of the dwellings, so it needs to be proportionate to the applicant's needs and character. So we don't know what that is at the moment. That would be for reserved matters because scale is reserved. Ideally, it would have been considered now, if anyone's listening that wants to put forward a local needs dwelling, I'd recommend ideally you let us know what scale it's going to be, because that, if something's a mansion, generally speaking, people can't then afford to buy it. But that's kind of a different point. We can consider that at reserved matters stage.
Any other further comments? If not, it has been recommended by Councillor Leather, seconded by Councillor Heppel, that the application is approved, subject to those conditions to be agreed with the Chair and Vice Chair. Are we all happy to go to the vote?
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Bushby. 4. Councillor Hames. 4. Councillor Heppel.
4.
Councillor Leather.
4.
Councillor Lott.
4.
Councillor Thomas.
4.
Councillor Wheatley. 4. Councillor Whittaker. 4. That's unanimous, Chair.
Thank you very much. Right, that is the end of the application. Right, so I'll just wait for the members of the public to go. Right, we now go on to item 8 on your agenda, appeal decisions 59 to 74. Are there any comments on that? No? Cost on appeals, pages 76 to 79. I've just got one query on that, actually. Because the other cost decisions have got the paperwork contained in the agenda, but with regard to the one at Church Meadow High, Bickington, the application for cost was refused, and there's no letter from the inspector contained within the agenda, and I just wondered why that was, or was it just an omission?
I don't know is my rather vague answer.
Because it just makes interesting reading, because the inspector says, because the applicant said that the planning committee acted against policy sort of thing, and the inspector comes back and said, in this instance, the applicant has set out that the council's planning committee acted unreasonably, refusing the application contrary to officer advice. However, the committee is not bound to officer advice. And while I have allowed the appeal and therefore agree with the committee's conclusions, I do not agree with the committee's conclusions. It was not unreasonable for the committee to have determined that, in their view, the proposal would lead to harm. So I think that should have been included in the agenda. Item number 10, delegated AGMB applications on page 80. Number 11, planning decisions on pages 81 to 90, page 81, page 82, page 83, page 84, page 85, page 86, page 87, page 88, page 89, and page 90. Well, there you go then. I couldn't find any this month. So, we've got no part 2 items, so I declare the meeting closed at 11:15. Thank you very much.